Hi, welcome to Binging with Bacchus, our subsidiary show of In the Library. Today we are interviewing Nathan Adler from Westminster Brewing Company. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Randall, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah. What should we know about the background and the growth and the success of this brewery?
Well, we're pretty new right now. We got our doors open May 3rd, so we're just about at the almost 5 month mark now. What we've done is a lot of different styles. So what we like to do is offer many options for our patrons to come in for. So you see where primarily we'll focus on the German Bavarian style wheat beers. You see that in the Hefeweizen, the Dunkelweizen, the two Weizenbox. That's kind of my wheelhouse. I started focusing on that here about 7 years ago or so with a trip to Oktoberfest in Munich. And that from that point on, my motivation, I remember thinking to myself that there isn't a better beer that I would want right now than a Hefeweizen. Sitting in the beer tent with a big old liter of beer and stein and just having a fantastic time with 700 of my newest, closest friends.
You're making me thirsty. So, what got you into brewing?
Well, I've always kind of had a passion for beer. Years ago, I worked in a restaurant that was very wine-centric and very wine-focused and had a fantastic selection. And I always would have the conversation with sommeliers that I felt that beer was so broad, that styles were so great in the beer world that you could truly match a meal with a beer as well as you can with a wine. Now, that was not well received, and at that point in time, the craft beer industry wasn't quite where it is now, but I think that was kind of the beginnings of it, is the idea that beer can be a supplement for a wine, an alternative, because of the stylistic differences across the board.
Religious literature, they talk about their call narrative. This is kind of your beer call narrative.
I suppose so. Yeah. I think that's fair to say. I just love the idea of introducing people to maybe not necessarily obscure styles, but just something that they may be roughly familiar with, and trying to show that these styles are also great beers. Maybe you don't love every one of them, but broadening your palate only improves your ability to enjoy food, to enjoy drink going forward.
That's exactly true with wine, beer, and even distillates. What amazes me is I thought I had been missing out on a couple of years of success because this place is packed and people know about it, and it's such a wonderful environment of people, and people enjoy the beer, and your beer is just fantastic. What really blows me away is that it's only 5 months old. I didn't know that until just now. What makes you unique and causes you to be such a great success?
Well, I think it's a bit of the brewing technique plays a part in it, and I think that consumers' tastes have changed so greatly over the last even just a handful of years, 3 years, let's call it, right? Where 6-7 years ago, every brewery loved to have the big West Coast IPA, right? Very bitter, high IBUs, high hop additions, get that piney, resinous flavor. Well, as we've seen over the last, we'll call it 3 years, with the explosion in New England style IPAs, we kind of swung that pendulum, maybe some would say too far, on the bitterness.
I agree.
And so now we're starting to see where it's swinging back, where you're seeing, for instance, a New England style IPA that is very little, if any, bittering hops added to it. It's all very late, very citrusy, very floral, very bright. And that's all because I think we kind of went one way and now the pendulum has swung back. And so where I where I try and get that happy medium is by using a little bit of some of the German brewing techniques. I'm a big proponent of first wort hopping, which will give you that necessary bitterness to offset the sweetness of the malt, but doesn't give you that punch you in the face kind of mouth puckering high IBUs.
Every one of your pale ales that I've tried are approachable, they're pleasurable, they're pleasant on the palate. Very few places can do that.
Well, I appreciate you. That's kind of my goal is I want to brew in that particular style. I want to brew beers that are balanced, right? You have that big hop flavor because you're trying to truly highlight the hops, because what we have available to us now, I mean, not only domestically, but internationally, as far as the quality, consistency, and flavor profiles of the new hops that have been released in the last 5 years, it's easy to go big on the floral part or the citrus part, but keeping that a little bit of balance, keeping it where you have that malt back to it, where it's not overly malty, but it's there and present, to keep it in that easily approachable range. That's the goal, right? Is you don't want to put off half of your customer base just because you like to go incredibly big on the hops, right?
I've been to places where all they had was big hoppy beers, and I can handle those, but I think society doesn't all want to prove that they're tough and macho and they can handle those bitters. And also the palate. Palates are made in such a way that some people have a super palate where those bitters really, really stand out in a negative way, and others have less of a sensitive palate. And so because of that, they don't taste all of the nuances, but bitter to them is just normal.
It's or in some cases overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I completely agree. I mean, every palate is different, and that guides a lot of what we're trying to do here at WBC, in that we love our hops and we brew beers to highlight those hops. We want that smooth, balanced IPA or pale or red IPA, whatever the case may be, within that particular style. But for me, that style is utilized to highlight hops. So as you focus on that, then let those hops shine. You don't want to go too big on the malt, you don't want to go too big on the bitterness. You want those hops to be the star of the show. On the flip side of that, I love my German style wheat ales, right?
I do too.
And part of the reasoning for that is, I basically break beer down into 3 categories for myself when I'm categorizing it to me. And that's going to be hoppy beers, malty beers, and yeast ester derived beers. And so what we're trying to do to a certain extent here is highlight each of those 3 different categories. When you're getting a malty beer, you're getting a beer that you're going to taste the complexity of the malts that are going into it. When you're getting that hoppy beer, you're going to taste the hops and how they're blended, how they're balanced against certain flavor profiles. For the German style ales, you're highlighting that yeast. The Weihenstephan yeast is, I've been brewing with it for a number of years now. I love it. It gives off that classic banana, vanilla, clove, and in some instances a little hint of smoke. So within those 3 different categories, our goal and our hope is, as the brew team, that you can find a beer that you either like because it is yeast forward, because the malts are blended and shining and giving you that complex flavor, or as so much of the beer drinking community is, they love their hops, right? So let those 3 different ingredients be the star of the show when they're differentiated out into those different categories, if you will.
That's really amazing. There's one question I've left to ask you.
Sure.
I told you before that I know somebody who's quite an expert in beer. And by the way, you'd have a great wine palate too, I can tell. But he said that he likes to drink beer as he's kind of estimating what a brewery is like. He likes to taste your IPAs first.
Okay, yep.
And he goes for the IPAs, and then he says he can tell you what all the other beers are like. You had a different response to that last week, and I'd like to hear that. What do you do to kind of get a feel for what a brewery is doing for your first beers, and what process would you go through?
Well, for me personally, I'm always going to go in and try basically the lightest beer that they have. So if there is a German style lager or a Czech lager, anything that is very light, very malt bill, generally simple. And the reason that I'll do that is because, in particular, when you're looking at lagers, going in and trying a lager gives you an idea of the process of the brewery. How's the cleanliness? How is the fermentation temperature? Because with those light ales, there's nowhere to hide, right? You can't throw in a bunch of hops to hide the fact and still call it that style, right? So the lighter the beer, a Kolsch, a lager, the more the process of the brewer shines.
So,
well, I mean, you hear that pump running. It's got that wonderful pump.
15, 20,
And is demonstrated through that because, as I said, if there's any sort of off flavor, it's going to be amplified because there isn't a whole lot of other malts or hops or even yeast character, esters or phenols to kind of blend that in and cover it up, if you will.
How would you like to let people see out here in TV land, as Cranny on the Beverly Hillbillies used to say, how would you like to let them see the color and hear us talk about the aromas and what is on the palate with a few of your beers?
We had opportunity to taste those beers. They were wonderful, and Nathan answered many of these questions. To be continued in the next episode.
Turk!